Imagine exiting a conversation, convinced your words evaporated before they could land. Or maybe you find yourself silently celebrating when someone you envy fails, and then quickly judging yourself for even feeling that way. Imagine these aren't mere mood swings or harmless quirks. They could be the soft footprints of something far more pervasive. The covert pattern of self-exaltation you never even suspected. Not the kind that loudly cries out for attention, but the kind that skillfully camouflages itself behind politeness, behind the role of the victim, behind perfectionism. We throw around the word narcissist so easily today. Instagram influencers, exes, politicians. But what if the most dangerous kind wasn't out there, but in here? Dr. Julie Gottman, a clinical psychologist who's spent decades working with couples, says narcissists don't just ignore your needs, they make it impossible for you to even explain them. They can't see your pain because they're too busy managing their own shame. But here's the curveball. What if that same mechanism lives inside you, just quieter? In this video, we're going deep. Not into pathology, but into subtle, almost invisible behaviors that most people never realize are actually rooted in a fragile, defensive ego. Through the lens of psychology and philosophy, Freud, Jung, Adler, Sartre, and Nietzsche will explore 7 subtle signs of covert narcissism that could be silently shaping your relationships, your self-image, and your emotional life. This isn't about assigning fault. It's about cultivating insight. Once you recognize the cycle, you gain the freedom to carve a new path. And there. Are you prepared to uncover the quiet self-importance guiding your choices? Let's dive in. Here's the unsettling part. Most covert narcissism doesn't look like ego. It looks like overthinking, over-apologizing, hypersensitivity, victimhood, even self-hatred. You might replay conversations for days. Wonder if people are mad at you. Feel easily slighted, then guilty for feeling that way. You crave affirmation. But when someone gives it to you, it never really lands. It feels temporary, hollow, like pouring water into a cup with a tiny crack. You might constantly compare yourself to friends, to strangers, even to your own partner. Their success doesn't just challenge you, it threatens you, and you'd never say it aloud. But some part of you secretly wishes they'd fail just once, so you could breathe easier. It's not that you want to hurt them, you just don't know how to stop measuring your worth by what others have. You apologize often, but inside, you hold grudges tightly. You remember every insult, every look, every time someone didn't text back. You tell yourself, I'm just sensitive, but deep down, there's a burning question, why do I feel so easily wounded? You may not be arrogant, you may not be loud, but that doesn't mean narcissism isn't there. Covert narcissism wears a different mask. It looks like chronic self-doubt, but it's rooted in the same fragile structure. An ego that's terrified of being ordinary. That's why it clings to subtle control over how people see you, over how much they praise you, over how your story is told. And maybe no one sees it. Maybe even you haven't, until now. Pause and reflect. Have you ever caught yourself putting on a show, not for the applause, but as a shield against being seen? To understand covert narcissism, we have to go beneath behavior, into the architecture of the self. This is where psychology meets philosophy. Let's start with Freud. To him, narcissism wasn't confidence. It was a defense, a fortress built around a fragile ego to keep out unbearable shame. In his theory, projection is key. If a person can't tolerate the feeling, they exile it and see it in someone else. That envy, that bitterness, that selfishness, it can't be me, so it must be you. Now imagine living in that cycle, feeling shame, projecting it, attacking others for it, feeling ashamed again. This isn't malice. It's your brain's way of guarding you from pain, running on autopilot. As Viktor Frankl observed, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our freedom to choose. Jealousy, rage, pride, but also vulnerability and creativity. When the fear of your buried truths runs deep, you clutch tightly to your crafted persona, the confident performance you project to everyone around you. The kind partner, the humble achiever, the always reasonable victim. But behind that mask is a storm of shame, envy, and pain that hasn't been made conscious. And it leaks out in passive aggression, in control games, in subtle sabotage. Humanistic psychologist Carl Rogers observed, "The curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change." Adler, another giant of early psychology, offered a different view. He believed most people aren't driven by pleasure, but by a deep striving for superiority, to escape feelings of inferiority. If you secretly feel not enough, you'll work overtime to appear more than, not by bragging, but by subtly devaluing others, fishing for praise, or clinging to moral victimhood. This striving isn't pride, it's compensation. Social psychologist Jonathan Haidt, author of The Righteous Mind, which unpacks our moral emotions, defines resentment like this. When you feel powerless, rather than adapt, you consecrate your pain as a badge of virtue. You wrap your setbacks in purpose, and you label anyone who questions you as the adversary. The covert narcissist doesn't shout, "I'm better than you." They whisper, "You hurt me, you owe me." They play the righteous victim, and in doing so, feel superior. This is the emotional mechanism behind the signs. The behaviors aren't random. They're precise adaptations to shame, to fear, to psychic wounds that haven't been named. But once you see the structure, you can begin to choose something else. Envision a garden where every flower competes for sunlight and none can bloom in the shade of another. It's curated, smoothed out, filtered by fear. This is the covert narcissist's life. Not a performance for applause, but a desperate disguise to avoid the terror of being truly seen. That facade, it gleams without a single crack. The soft-spoken caretaker, the humble intellect, the hurt but noble victim. But beneath that mask is what Jung called the shadow, a creature made of disowned need, envy, anger, and a craving for importance that never feels safe to admit. So instead, we project, we accuse, we subtly punish. We feel morally superior for being hurt, while secretly seething with resentment. It's not theatrical, it's quiet, and that's what makes it so hard to spot, especially when it lives in us. Psychologist Dr. Julie Gottman says it clearly. People with narcissistic traits aren't just bad at empathy. They don't even register your pain. If it conflicts with their narrative, you become an interruption, not a person. Envision a grand cathedral, with hidden cracks in its pillars, silent warnings of past storms endured. Every compliment, every achievement, is like hanging another painting on a wall that's slowly caving in. That's what covert narcissism feels like. You try to decorate a collapsing structure, hoping no one hears it groan. The need for validation never ends, because it was never about admiration, it was about survival. If I'm not special, I'm nothing. If I'm not praised, I'll disappear. This is not vanity. It's abandonment trauma in disguise. It's shameful to dress up as a virtue. It's fear wearing the mask of humility. So ask yourself, what fragments of yourself have you tucked away just to sustain that seamless exterior? Which emotions do you wear like a badge, while burying the rest deep within? To break this cycle, you don't seek louder applause, you seek raw transparency, and the strength to hold your gaze when the reflection at last reveals the true you. Breathe deeply. I know this might feel jarring, because you may spot glimpses of your own journey woven into these words, but here's what matters. Recognizing the signs isn't an accusation, it's an invitation. Every person who's ever felt unseen, unloved, or not enough has built armor. You're not broken, you adapted. Maybe that protective guise once held you together. Maybe that burst of anger kept you from breaking. Maybe that pang of envy was your heart pleading, "I'm terrified, I'll always be overlooked." Yet here you remain, engaging with every word. It shows a part of you is waking, not to chase flawlessness, but to embrace your authentic self. Consider this. Which judgment of someone else is actually a plea from your own hidden hurt? Share your answer, or just one word that came up for you in the comments. If this cut through for you, subscribe, not for tips, but for permission to stay real with yourself. We confront the realities everyone else avoids, because that's the doorway to real liberation. And if this has struck a chord, you may find value in our last discussion. So, how do you begin to unlearn covert narcissism when it doesn't feel like narcissism at all, but like shame, self-doubt, or endless overthinking? The answer isn't grand. It's subtle, just like the problem. Here are 3 practices that move you not away from yourself, but toward a more honest, stable identity. Practice 1. The direct request drill. The next time you feel that snide remark bubbling up, or notice yourself shutting someone out, pause, politely ask, "Would you be open to hearing what's on my mind?" This simple request trains you to speak needs directly. When they say sure, go on. I realized I felt brushed aside when you changed the subject mid-conversation, and I needed you to acknowledge my perspective. If they say no, thank them anyway. Then decide how you'll meet your own need. You've broken the cycle of silent resentment. This exercise isn't about self-condemnation. It's a step toward true cohesion. When you surface those buried parts, you no longer offload them onto others. Practice 2. Emotion meter check-in. Set a timer 3 times today. When it dings, rate your irritation on a 1 to 10 scale. No judgment, just notice. 7. Tight jaw. Then ask yourself, what need is behind this 7? Name it. Respect, space, clarity, and breathe into that awareness. Finally, choose one small action to meet that need. A calm request, a brief walk, or self-affirmation. Feel the tension ease. Rewrite your story, not to erase your pain, but to stop repeating it. Practice 3. Role switch reflection. When you catch yourself sulking or delivering the backhanded compliment, imagine stepping into the other person's shoes. What would you hear? Narrate silently. They said, "I'll handle it myself." I felt sidelined. In their position, I might think they don't trust my contribution. This builds insight into how your tone lands. Now rephrase out loud. Could you help me understand why you chose to take on that task alone? And watch how the energy shifts from passive aggression to genuine dialogue. Then, in moments of shame or comparison, come back to this inner core. Ask, what virtue can I express now? Kindness, courage, honesty. This doesn't mean repressing emotion. It means anchoring through emotion. You're not a puppet to praise or reject anymore. You're building an identity that stands even when the applause stops. A real example, from performance to presence. Let's take an example. Zara was a quiet overachiever who always downplayed her successes. Every "I'm not that good" was a silent request for reassurance. She didn't think she was narcissistic. She thought she was humble. But inside, she was terrified of seeming arrogant. So she self-deprecated and felt resentful when others didn't rush to praise her. In therapy, she started noticing when she was performing humility instead of simply being honest. She stopped apologizing for her wins. She began validating herself before waiting for others to do it. It was awkward at first, then liberating. The need for constant reassurance slowly faded because the voice inside her finally learned how to speak kindly. Healing often feels like a riptide, pulling you backward before it carries you forward. Not because it's wrong, but because it threatens the one thing covert narcissism is built to protect. The fragile self-image you've spent years constructing. You may feel resistance. Voices in your head whisper, "If I stop performing, will anyone still care? If I admit my envy, doesn't that make me a bad person? If I let go of being the victim, what do I become?" Here's the moment it cuts deep. True growth often aches like loss, because the part of you that clung to armor and rules will protest as if it's being erased, and in a way it is. You're shedding a false identity, one that protected you but also imprisoned you. Friedrich Nietzsche warned us, when we are tired, we are attacked by ideas we conquered long ago. Old patterns will come back. The urge to blame, to hide, to punish instead of express, to protect instead of connect. That's part of the journey. Progress winds its own path. You may be drawn to step backward, to turn away from those hidden parts, to slip into familiar roles that once kept you secure. Here's the real insight. This isn't about applause. It's about finding calm. Each moment you choose reflection over blame, each time you lean into discomfort instead of deflecting it, each breath you take to sit with guilt rather than veil it with wit, you're rebuilding your integrity, piece by piece, depth by depth. Which moment has challenged you most? And what helped you through? Share if it feels right. If you take away only one thing, you're not here to be perfect. You're here to be genuine, because candor spooks the facade, but sustains the authentic core. So what does it actually feel like to begin leaving covert narcissism behind? It's not loud. It's not a dramatic moment of rebirth. It's quieter than that, more sacred. It's walking into a room and not scanning for admiration, because you're finally okay with just being there. It's hearing someone else succeed and feeling joy instead of threat. It's noticing envy rise up, and instead of denying it, you whisper, "I see you," and let it go. It's standing in front of the mirror, not performing humility, not clinging to victimhood, not telling a story, just being. You begin to speak from your core, not to manipulate, not to bait praise, but to connect. You still feel the old impulses, to control the narrative, to defend, to deflect, but now you pause, you choose. This is what Jean-Paul Sartre meant when he said, "We are our choices." You realize you don't have to prove you're special to deserve love. You don't have to be perfect to be seen. You don't have to stay in victimhood to be safe. You let go of being the righteous one and start becoming a real one. As Simone de Beauvoir wrote, "To will oneself moral and to will oneself free are one and the same decision." This is what healing looks like. Not just changing behaviors, but recovering your agency. You're no longer the character in someone else's projection. You're no longer the object in someone else's gaze. You are a subject again, a living, breathing self. Yes, it's vulnerable. Yes, it's terrifying, but it's also real. And realness is where meaning lives. You don't heal by becoming someone new. You heal by remembering who you were before the world told you to hide. By staying with me until now. You've performed a quiet rarity. You've dared to turn your gaze within, not to critique, but to learn. That kind of bravery outshines any facade you could forge. So before you go, ask yourself, what has my pain been trying to protect? What false self have I built to avoid being hurt again? And what would it look like to finally come home to myself? Not to be impressive, but to be whole. If this video helped illuminate a part of yourself or someone you love, know this, you're not alone. These patterns are human. They're built from fear, but they can be softened by truth. Leave a comment with your answer, or just one word, seen. And if you want to continue this journey, hit subscribe. Not for tips or tricks, but for a deeper relationship with yourself. In our next episode, we'll explore why people don't take you seriously, the psychology of soft power and presence, and how to stop over-explaining, stop shrinking, and start embodying quiet confidence. You are more than your built-up armor. You are not bound by old wounds. You are not the inner voice insisting you need approval to be whole. You are the space beneath that voice, the one who sees it, holds it, and chooses something better. As Nietzsche said, no one can build you the bridge on which you, and only you, must cross the river of life. But you're already on it, and every honest step you take brings you back to the self you were always meant to meet.